Welcome to the Perfect Partner Podcast, the show for those of you who have not given up on love despite its challenges, where we have those productive but sometimes difficult conversations about things that can really affect your relationship. I am your host, Erin F. Darton, and I am an emotional intelligence and relationship coach. I am on a journey to help you understand the importance of emotional intelligence and building and maintaining healthy relationships. Today, we are switching it up a bit. We usually talk about things that affect your romantic relationship, but today we are going to talk about the relationship between a parent and a child. Most of you guys are parents, so I think that you will find this episode very helpful. So we're going to talk about gentle parenting and how do you make sure that you are seeing your child, establishing that relationship where they feel open enough to talk to you, but also a relationship where you are still guiding them and giving them the tools to grow up to be productive citizens of society. Today is Keri Cooper, Keri Cooper LCSW. She is the owner of Keri Cooper Holistic Therapy in Northern New Jersey. In her private practice, she counsels teens and works to give them the tools they need to navigate life. Keri takes a holistic approach to therapy, looking at the whole person and not just their symptoms. Keri is the author of Mental Health Uncensored, 10 Foundations Every Parent Needs to Know. It's a book designed to give parents steps on how to improve their children's mental health. Her second book is a workbook for teens, Mental Health Uncensored, 10 Foundations Every Teen Needs to Know. She is a speaker and a writer who helps educate teens and parents on topics teens face in everyday life. She is a graduate of the University of Penn and continues to further her education by obtaining additional certifications in her field, one of her favorite pastimes. When Keri isn't busy working with teens, she is busy with her own 4 children and her flock of chickens. That's interesting.
Yes.
Keri, welcome to the Perfect Partner Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for joining us. So let's just jump right in. I'd like for everybody to have a baseline.
Mm-hmm.
Let's start off with what exactly is gentle parenting?
So I think when we look back on how parenting has been in the past, it's been more, I'm going to tell you what to do and you're going to go do it.
Right.
And that is no longer the way.
Right.
Now, I will tell you, in some instances, it's swung too much the other way. Yes. And that is not okay either, because children need boundaries. So it's about giving your kid those boundaries, being able to parent them, but also being able to connect with them and for them to see you as somebody who's going to catch them when they fall, not be afraid to tell you when they fail. So I think that is kind of what we're looking at in terms of parenting these days. And that's kind of the goal. And listen, every day is a daily struggle. Parenting is not easy at all. And when you have multiple children, especially, the moment you think you have it down, the other child's completely different. And you have to relearn the whole way of connecting, because that's what it is. It is connecting with each individual child for who they are and giving them what they need. My children will especially say to me, well, you gave that one, this, or this one got this at this age. And I said, I do not parent equally. I parent based upon your individual needs, based upon who you are individually.
That is tough. So let me tell you, that is one of my biggest fears in having children. Because like you said, children are all different, right? Even just looking at like my nieces, my nephew, like everybody is different. And I am so afraid of not being able to put my children in environments where they feel supported. Like my nieces are night and day. And it's like, what do you do when your children are so different?
And so different from you, or different from what you were expecting them to be. And that's a really hard conversation I have in my office a lot with parents, is you have to get this idea out of your head of who you want your children to be and realize who your children are. Because if you keep on trying to get them to this ideal that you have in your head, it's going to be a battle constantly. Like, you can't change your friend. You can't change your kids. They are who they are. So you got to learn to connect with them.
So that's a really good point. I wasn't even going to start here, but since you just mentioned that in terms of letting go of who you want your children to be.
Yeah.
So that can be difficult, right? Because we have
Yeah.
this idea. I think we all want our children to be successful and a productive citizen of society. And right, we know that we have to offer some type of guidance. How do we know if we are offering guidance, that what they say, train up a child in the way that they should go,
Mhm.
versus we are trying to, I guess, dictate where their future is? Like, how do we draw the line?
Right. So you have to really kind of look at how is your child reacting to your guidance.
Mhm.
If you're trying to make your child play sports and they are just like throwing a fit every time you're trying to drag them on the field,
Mhm.
sports may not be for them.
Mhm.
And we need to look at other avenues. If homework is becoming a massive battle and, is coming into screaming matches, your child may not be an A student, and that's okay.
And that's okay.
And that's okay.
Mm.
It's what does your child like and how can you encourage it? Because you're right, your children need to be productive members of society. You should not be enabling them and letting them live a life where they're just sitting on the couch, like eating Doritos.
Right.
Like they need to be doing something. But what do they want to do?
Mm.
And that may not be what you think they should be doing. But if it's something that's productive, you got to go for it.
And that's so interesting. I had a conversation with a woman once, and she was having a similar issue with her I don't know if it was a son or a daughter. They were about 17, 18 at that age where they need to figure out what's next. And that's kind of what I told her, because she had been trying to, she made recommendations and suggestions of what her child should be doing, and the child just didn't seem to take to it. And I asked her, like, well, what if you ask them what is it that they want? Like, put them in the driver's seat, like, because of course, she didn't want her child at home on a couch eating
Hmm.
Doritos. And so she was trying to push them in a certain direction. And I said, well, what if you switch the roles? So put them in the driver's seat and ask them how you can support them. Now, I don't know where that came from. I don't have kids. It just sounded like something, that might work. But she said it actually helped.
Yeah. Because it's about relationships and respecting who the other person is and saying, well, okay, what do you want? And how can I help support that?
Wow. So, but at what age is it okay to start asking, well, what do you want, right? Because I would imagine that depending on the age,
Right.
they may not know, or they, you know what I mean?
So I
Right.
think if they're really little, it's
Mhm.
parents, it's helpful for the parents to say, like, okay, let's try this. Let's
Okay.
try this. Like, let's try soccer. Let's try, the school play. Let's try that. Let's try this. And to see if you like it or not.
Mhm.
So to give
Exposure.
them a wide variety when they're really young of, what is it that you possibly like? Because unfortunately, especially in school, kids aren't exposed to a lot of different things.
Right.
So if you as a parent can do that, expose them to, go out for a hike with them in the woods, like, go learn maybe like an instrument, like whatever you can do to try
Mhm.
to expose them to all these other things that are out there
Mhm.
and to see what sticks with them. And that's when you're going to see them actually really start internally motivating as well, when it's something they want to do.
Right.
You are not going to motivate somebody if they don't want to do it.
Mm. So now what they want to do, we may not necessarily think is productive or is going to be successful, right? We see this all the time in movies. Like, my dad watches Hallmark movies all day long, right? And so there is the child that wants to go and be an artist or a
Yep.
singer, and the parent is like, no way, you're never going to succeed. And so what do we do, or what should parents do if they feel like their child's interest may not necessarily be as successful as they would like them to be?
Well, I think one is to define what does successful look like.
Mhm.
Is it just that they need to be able to support themselves? That could be okay if they're following like their passion and their love.
Mhm.
But then it's a conversation of, okay, if you want to do this, how do you support yourself while you're trying to achieve this?
Mhm.
What's your plan B? Because there is a reality to all of this.
Mhm.
You want to be a famous singer? Fantastic. What's your plan B to pay your bills? Because I'm
Right.
not supporting you.
Right, 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 right. Right. That's a good point. That's a good point. And I think my parents always let us do whatever. Like I went to performing arts high school.
Yeah.
I danced for a while. I ended up going to law school and then
Yeah.
quit that. So it's like I fully support whatever it is that you're interested in right now. Do it. You can always change your mind later. Like
You
you don't have
can
to do it
always
forever.
change your mind.
Mm,
Yes. And that's something that I always really talk to kids about too, because a lot of them have a lot of anxieties about going to college and, oh my gosh, I have to decide what I have to do
mm,
with the rest of my life. No, you don't.
right.
You have to decide what you want to do right now,
That's a good point.
not for the next, 40, 50 years. So you could always change. I don't know why we keep on telling kids, like, no, like, what do you want to be? Like, you could be like three different things in your lifetime.
Hmm.
I never thought I was going to be an author. Here I am being an author.
Right. I thought I was going to be a lawyer forever. I quit multiple times. So it's like, absolutely. That's really good advice. Not even just for kids, everybody. You don't have to
Right.
figure everything out. Just figure out right now.
Figure out right now.
I love that. Okay, so let's go back to this whole idea of gentle parenting. So
Hmm.
you said it's the idea of setting healthy boundaries, but also, I guess, like seeing the child, right? There was this
Yes.
thing of you do as I say, don't ask any questions, right? That's the way that things were. And we're moving away from that. What are some, I guess, benefits of moving away from that approach to parenting?
I think you have a better connection with your child when they understand why they need
Hmm.
to do something, when they understand that you're not just like, screaming out orders at them, but instead like having this relationship and this connection with them. I really think it helps strengthen the bonds.
Hmm.
And then I think that they're more likely to come to you and talk out problems and to say, like, hey, what should I do about this? Like, what's your advice? What's your guidance? Because you're not just going to tell them exactly what they have to do.
Hmm.
It's like, well, what about this option? What about this option? And as a parent, you want them to be able to problem solve on their
Right.
own. So you
Right.
want to be able to give them guidance, but ultimately they need to figure out what they want to do.
And by helping them process, that's giving them
Yeah.
the tools to learn how to problem solve when maybe you're not around the next time they have an issue, or when they go off to college and right,
Yes.
they're not there to help solve every problem. That gives them those tools. I
Right. And
like
you
it.
should not be there to solve every problem. Like you have to you have to
Let
let
go.
them problem solve. And I talk a lot about that in my book. Um they can't be relying on you for every single answer. And unfortunately, in today's day and age with phones and how everyone
Hmm.
is instantly available, kids are texting their parents from school. What do I say to my teacher? Like, my paper is going to be late. What do I say? I got a bad test grade. Like, you have to be able to say to them, figure it out. What do you think you
Right.
should say?
Right. And not handicap them.
Hmm.
Hmm. So are there any, I guess, downsides to gentle parenting? It sounds like it's a pretty good idea. Like I know everybody isn't on board with it. So where does the naysayers, what's that about?
I think a lot of the naysayers are, we're kind of stuck back in a time where our parents just told us what to do and that's just what we did.
Mhm.
Um, and that thought process, like, well, they're just children. And yeah, they are children, but they're also
Right.
human beings.
Mhm.
Um, and I think, sometimes we swing the other direction where we just let the kids do whatever they want. And that's not okay either. Like they
Mhm.
need boundaries, they need structure, they need to feel safe and to know what's expected.
Right.
Um, but I think that, it's a difficult balance is
Mhm.
really the challenge. It's a very hard balance. And it's very hard to be so emotionally connected and with every child that you have and so differently. You have to really
Mhm.
parent differently for each child. And that's a challenge.
But how do you know what each child needs?
You have to like really connect with their personality and also asking them, what do you need? What do you need from me?
Mm.
Those kids where when they're mad, they just need to be left alone. And
Mhm.
you know those kids when they're mad who just need a hug.
Okay.
And they're very different people.
Very much so.
Right. And those are the conversations you could have with your child. Listen, when you get frustrated, when you get upset, do you just need a few moments? Do you like, what do you need from me? How do you need me to be there? And that's kind of the conversations we have with our partners in life.
Right.
What do you need from me? How can I show up for you?
And have the same conversation with your child.
Same with your kids. How do you need me to show up?
Mm. That's good. Is there ever a moment where you think the kid may not know?
Yeah, and that's completely fine because sometimes we don't know as humans, and that's when you talk about it and say, yeah,
Mm.
like sometimes I don't know what I need either.
Mhm.
And it's
Yeah.
okay not to not know.
Okay. So okay, we're seeing the child, we're connecting with them. I think a big part of gentle parenting, which is different, is allowing your child to express how they feel about certain things or to question things, which is,
Mhm.
for some people, it's something totally new, right? We would have never asked why or, had something to say when it comes to, whatever. I mean, I can appreciate it as an emotional intelligence coach, right? You're teaching a child to acknowledge how they're feeling.
Mhm.
Um, I guess what's the best way to help them identify what they're saying or how they're feeling and to communicate that with their parents?
I think that, you could always ask those questions. Like they all know what their emotions, they all know emotional words.
Mhm.
So it's, how are you feeling right now? And I love when they tell me angry because I always say anger is a secondary emotion and something's always fueling the anger. So then
Okay.
it's like, okay, well, what is making you angry? Is it that you're hurt? Is it that you're jealous? Is it that you're sad?
Mhm.
What is behind that? So to take a step back from it, or when they're nervous about something, okay, why? Like, what are you concerned about?
Mhm.
What is that next step?
Mm.
And to really have those conversations. And when you have a good relationship with your child, you're able to have those conversations. And sometimes, and this is really important too, the conversations are not going to happen in the moment
Right.
because there's too much emotion happening.
Yeah.
So you need to kind of just like bite your tongue, take a step back, and later on be like, hey, you seemed really upset. Like, what else was happening for you?
Mhm.
Like, you can always go back to a conversation. But
Mm.
sometimes parents are so like problem solving that they're trying to solve it right then and there. They're like, tell me what's wrong. And the kid's like, I
Mhm.
don't know,
Right. Right, right, right.
Why?
'Cause and that's actually kind of what I was thinking about, like, for the impatient parent, because that's definitely a thing, right?
Yeah.
It's a real thing because you are also a human trying to
Yes.
parent another human. And
Hmm.
so there's the impatient parent, but what about when the conflict is between the two? And so now the parent also has their emotions and they may not be able to, or they may not have the capacity in that moment to also navigate their child's emotion.
Right. That's when I tell a parent, just take a step away, just take a step back. And you can even say, like, I'm having a lot of emotions. I need to go get myself
Mhm.
together and to take a step back. And listen, there's going to be plenty of times where you don't take that step back and where
Mhm.
you don't show great emotions because you're human and that's
Mhm.
okay.
Mm.
But then to talk about it after, not to just sweep it under the rug like nothing happened. Talk about it. Say, I'm sorry. I lost it. I have emotions. I was really angry. Let me tell you why I was angry. Because I feel frustrated because of this or whatever you need to say, but to address it. Because there's nothing more confusing to a child than to have a parent completely blow up and then 15 minutes later act like nothing just happened.
That sounds like some people's romantic relationships that I know.
Yes. You got to talk about it. Unless the other person's like, wait a second, did that just happen? Did I think it was a bigger deal than what it was? Because they're acting like it's fine now. And you
Right.
start not trusting yourself.
So wait a second. So
I just threw a lot on you.
that
I'm
was a whole lot. So we just went from acknowledging
Mhm.
and apologizing to your child. That's big.
That
You're the
is
parent.
big. It
Parents can be wrong.
Yeah, I'm wrong a lot,
Mhm.
and that's okay.
Mhm.
And I think that's one of the big shifts that we're seeing because, years ago, parents were never wrong. But we're
Yeah.
human, of course we're gonna be wrong. So I'm
Mm.
human, when I'm telling my kid for the 5th time to take the trash out,
Mhm.
I'm annoyed.
Right. Right.
But it's about talking to them later about your emotions and being like, listen, I'm frustrated because this is how I feel.
Mhm. Wow. And so acknowledging and apologizing to your child, does that undermine your authority? Like, will they still respect you as a parent if you're coming to them to apologize?
Yeah, I think they respect you more because they know that when you make a mistake, when you're wrong, you could own up to it.
Mm.
I can own that. I'll own when I make a mistake.
And it's teaching accountability.
It's teaching accountability. We are all wrong at times. It's how do you fix it?
Mm.
How do you fix a relationship that maybe you didn't act your best in? How do you fix something at work when maybe you lost your temper there? How do you fix it? How were you able to go to that other person and be like, you know what? I was wrong. I let my emotions get the best of me. Could we restart this? What do we need to do to fix it?
And I never thought about this until you just said that in terms of, and when you said it sounded like adult relationships. And so what it made me just think of is attachment styles, right? How we form relationships as adult is based on our interactions with our caregiver as a child.
Mhm.
And I feel like that's a perfect example. Would you agree?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
never thought about that. So how you see your parent handle conflict, either with you or maybe with your other parent
Hmm.
or whomever, is kind of how you adopt your these conflict resolution skills
Yeah.
as an adult.
Hmm. So when we have these adults in relationships and they don't know how to apologize and they don't know how to say sorry and they don't know how to take any type of accountability and they don't talk about the issue and then the issue just keeps on coming up, look back to their parents.
Wow. That makes sense. I never thought about it like that, but it makes total sense.
Hmm.
And so how do we okay, so you said if the parent is not in a space to have that productive conversation, you said come back to it, which
Come
makes
back.
sense because I tell people, couples all the time, like that's one of the biggest mistakes is going to talk too soon
Yep.
because you can't have a productive conversation.
And parents try to do that a lot because they want to be heard, right? We want to be heard. We want to make our point. So our kid is like freaking out and we keep going. And it's like,
And they're
parents,
not
just
listening.
stop. They're not listening to you anyway at this point. Like, you got to just walk away.
Wow. Okay. So we're going to acknowledge their feelings. We're going to take accountability. And so in terms of them and their feelings, this kind of makes me think about privacy.
Mm.
And I think it's a big thing with kids.
Hmm.
So what if there's a situation where the child doesn't want to tell you at all? Do you respect that privacy or that desire? Or as a parent, is it your job to keep digging until they open up?
If they really don't want to tell you, they're not going to tell you if you keep digging, you
Mm,
know? And I think it also depends on ages and what exactly the situation is. And, is it serious, dangerous, all that type of stuff? Or is
right.
it just they come home from school and they look really upset?
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, what's wrong? They're like, nothing. Nothing's wrong. Okay.
Right.
But what you could always say to them is like, okay, if you don't feel like talking about it right now, that's fine. But my door's open.
And you just leave it up to them.
Yeah, you can't always force a child to talk about something they don't want to talk about.
Mm,
I mean, could somebody force you to talk about something that you don't want to talk about? No, I'm just going to lie to them at that point then.
right. But you're the parent. You want to make sure that they aren't dealing with something that's dangerous or that could be potentially harmful to them. So then what do you like
Right.
how do
So
you
again, it depends on the situation. If it's like they just come home upset from school, like, okay. If there's a dangerous situation, that's a whole nother ball game. That's, you have
Okay.
to parent, you have to make their safety comes
Mhm.
first all the time. So
Mhm.
if you are suspecting that there's a dangerous situation, that there is, an addiction or substance abuse issue, like, no, you have to sit down and dig. You have to be like,
Okay.
and many times at that level, you're bringing in a professional to help you do this.
Gotcha. Okay, so what are some of the things, or I don't know if there are some common issues that you've seen teens dealing with like nowadays?
So I think that one of the things a lot of teens are dealing with in terms of their relationship with parents is that the parents are doing too much for them and not trusting them to do it on their own.
Mm,
Like, I have high school students, like juniors and seniors in high school, like they're about to go off to college and the parents are checking their school portals and their grades and texting them being like, This assignment's not done. When are you going to do this assignment? If your child at the high school level does not know how to deal with their own schoolwork, there's a bigger issue here.
Right.
Like, you have to be able to let go. I just had the conversation recently with a parent. I said, you've done so much work raising your child. You have done such a great job. You have to trust that you've done a good job. And you have to start backing away a little bit. They have to have responsibility. They have to be okay to fail and to be able to figure it out and come back from that. You can't be checking to make sure every assignment is due when they're juniors and seniors in high school.
Okay, so don't check their grades.
Please, please stop checking their grades.
Is there anything else that you see a lot of between like a parent and a child?
It comes back down to like this, like, trust, you know? And I think with social media and phones and all of that, like, it's so easy for parents just to know every movement.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to ask yourself, why? Why do you want to know every movement? Why don't you trust your children? Like, when we were young, we were out. Nobody really knew where we were.
Right.
And now, parents are texting kids, why did you leave, Jenny's house? Did you have a fight? Why are you at Sheila's house? Like, really?
Right. They're like, it's pretty intrusive.
Yes, that's really such a great way to put it, is that parenting has become very intrusive. Very intrusive. They need to have a little bit of their own identity and their own free will at times, within reason and depending on their age. But again, I think sometimes knowing too much is not always a good thing. So, trusting your child a little bit more and being able to let go, which is an entire chapter of my book, like learning to let go. And that goes down to like the very basics of life. And when we talk about parenting and building these children to, up to be successful adults, they need to know how to do their own laundry. They need to know how to do basic cooking. Like, these are steps that parents need to be comfortable with letting their child do.
So let me ask you this. So you said trust is a big thing and, not really, you got to learn how to let go.
Yeah.
But I can understand why a parent would still want to be involved in their child's life. What ways or what tips do you have for parents to, I guess, create a welcoming or a comfortable environment that their child will want to talk to them like willingly, like maybe not as a friend,
Right.
but are there things that parents can do to have that, a good relationship, a healthy relationships where the child feels like, oh, I can go talk to my mom about anything. I could talk to my dad about anything and not be fearful, or they're willing and, they're open to talking to their parent. I don't know that that's something that a lot of people has grown up with. So as we're trying to do things differently, do you have tips on how to make that, that open communication relationship?
Yes. So your child will talk to you more if they feel like you are listening and not judging them. So sometimes you need to bite your tongue a little bit and be more reflective and be like, oh, like, reflect back to them what they're saying instead of judging. Like, what do you mean you said that? They're not going to talk to you if they're going to feel judged. So also, it's when we talk about letting go, it's about letting go of tasks that they could do on their own, like things that they could do for themselves. But we want to stay involved. We want to stay connected. That's really important. So you want to be able to have these conversations. And I always say to parents, some of the best times to have conversations is when you're not face to face, but side by side. So whether that be in a car or go for a walk with your kids, which I always love doing, those are the moments when they don't need to stare at you in the face and they may be more open to talk about what happened throughout their day or what's going on in their life. And for you to really hear them without judgment. And that's really hard for parents to do. But to take that step back and like, just listen. Just listen.
Listen. And when do you give your input? Maybe never, I guess?
No, I think there's always times to give your input. I think it's, how do you give your input? And
Okay.
sometimes it could be more of like, oh, if I was in that situation, I may have done X, Y, or Z.
Okay.
Instead of
Okay.
being like, I can't believe you didn't do, or, how could you do that?
Right.
Think about what it sounds like, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So you could always use yourself like, oh, yeah, I've been in that situation and this is what I've done in the past. Or, hey, did you consider this option as well? You
Mm-hmm.
always want to be able to give guidance, just,
Not tell
without the
them what to
judgment.
do. Right. Just like you would want with your friend.
Absolutely.
Mm,
Absolutely.
mm. Okay. So this is seeming more like not necessarily a friendship. I mean, there still has to be some guidance, but
Absolutely. There has to be guidance, there has to be boundaries, all of that. Like at the end of the day, you are the parent. Like,
right. Right. Okay. So for those parents that maybe they don't have that open relationship yet, they're going to do it now because you just
yeah.
told them not to be judgmental, so they're going to work on it.
Hmm.
But for those that don't have it yet, are there common things that you are seeing maybe amongst your teen clients? Maybe not in terms of with their parent, but just teens are dealing with in general that parents maybe may need to be aware of?
I think that anxiety is through the roof. I think that we are really in a mental health crisis when it comes to these
Okay.
teens. And it was pretty bad before COVID. And then COVID
Mhm.
just, I mean, destroyed these kids. And they're still not really, they're not bouncing back. All through
Mm.
COVID, it really annoyed me every time I would hear somewhere people being like, kids are resilient. No, they're not. No, they're not. We're going through a global trauma. Trust me, this is impacting them. And I
Right.
think that, we didn't address it really well with these kids when it was happening to say, there is so much grief and trauma going on with you right now.
Mhm.
And to really lay it out there as to this is what's happening and I see it and I
Okay.
know you're going through it. So they're still going through anxiety because there's so much pressure on these kids. I mean, it is, parents always say, like, oh, well, when I went to school, yeah, listen, when you went to school, there wasn't social media. Somebody
Right.
wasn't possibly recording you at all times and posting about it. Like, it's a completely different ball game. So to
Mhm.
be able to say to your kids, like, I get that it is so different now than when I was in school. I get that there is so much more pressure because of social media. I get that
Mhm.
struggle. And to just let them know, like, you're aware of it.
Mhm. So with this anxiety,
Mm.
so maybe parents aren't aware of it. What are some signs or what would that look like in a child? Like are there certain things that a parent should be looking for to see if this is something that their child is struggling with?
When your child is exploding a lot at home, it's probably because they're stuffing a lot of feelings down throughout the day.
Okay.
And that should be a pretty big red flag of, wait a second, what's happening? Like, how are you feeling all day long to where you come home and now you're just exploding? Because
Mhm.
sometimes parents think of it as, my kid's so disrespectful. Think about it instead of, your kid is stuffing down all of these feelings all day long. And then they come home to the people who they know love them. And that's when they kind of release it all out. So don't take it so personal. Not to say that they're allowed to, like, have these massive meltdowns, but like, give a little bit of leeway and know that it's not about you.
Wow. It may look like disrespect,
Right.
but it may be because they're stuffing down. And that's when you need to start asking questions like, what's going on? Why do you
What's
feel like this?
what's going on? What has been so stressful today? Like,
Wow.
what are you worried about?
Okay. Other than the blow ups, are there any other signs that they may need to start paying more attention to the
Whenever you
child?
see a change in your child, whether that be all of a sudden them not engaging, engaging too much in homework where they're staying up all night doing it. Any dramatic shifts in grades is normally a pretty big indicator that something's wrong. If all of a sudden they had friends and they're going out and now they're not having friends and going out, like any big shifts, are they all of a sudden not eating, overeating? Like any shifts in their behavior is always something to think about.
And that's
Or
when
if
they
all
should
of a
start
sudden every
asking
morning they have stomach aches or headaches before school,
because they don't want to go.
they don't want to go. Something's pretty stressful.
And that's when they start asking questions.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, going to the other extreme, right? Because you just said parents would say, well, when I was
Mm-hmm.
growing up or whatever, right? There is also this idea that kids now are soft, right? And so is that a real thing? Like, are
Yes.
children
Yes, it is. And that goes back to parents overdoing and protecting them and doing everything for them. You know,
Mhm.
again, like when we're in the high school level and parents are complaining to coaches about kids not getting playing time, like
Right.
these are varsity sports. If your kid's not good enough to play, they're not going to get the
They're
playing
not
time.
gonna
Like you just need to deal with that.
Mhm.
But there is parents are so, swing the other way, so overprotective of their children's feelings.
Right.
Your child is going to be upset.
Mhm.
That's okay. You can't
Yeah.
protect them from that. They need to learn how to deal with those feelings. But I mean, there are definitely those parents, and it starts very early on. Like when a play date cancels and you see the parents, frantically trying to get another play date so their child's not upset. It's okay
Right.
to say to your kid, like, I know it stinks. They canceled. We'll reschedule, in a few weeks. It's okay for them to be upset. They're going to
So
be
don't
upset throughout their life.
so don't try and, I guess, replace it to prevent those emotions. They have to learn them.
Right. They have to learn them. You can't keep them in a bubble. That's not going to benefit them.
Wow.
They're going to fail a test. They're going to, get into a fight with a friend. I mean, the amount of times I see parents interfering socially with these children is through the roof at this point. You know?
So now what about when okay, let's say the parent isn't interfering, right? I've heard stories of the child was complaining about having to like clean their room and do their homework.
Mm-hmm.
Um and one person in particular that I'm thinking of, like the child was saying that they were suicidal because of it. Um and I don't know if that is something that is popular where
Mm-hmm.
because kids know we are as a society we are more aware or more sensitive to mental health now, that it has kind of sometimes become like a manipulation tool that some
Yeah.
kids use. So can we talk about that?
Yes, I actually write about that as well in my book. And I talk
Okay.
about the difference between your child being in crisis
Okay.
and then your child using mental health as an excuse.
Mm,
Because it does happen. If your child is in crisis, first and foremost, they should be seeing a therapist.
right.
If your child is in crisis, no, you probably shouldn't be making them take out the garbage and clean their room. But a crisis is a short period of time. So if your child has anxiety or depression, they can still do chores. Because when we have anxiety or depression as adults, we still have to do things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually a good thing to be productive when you have anxiety and depression.
Right.
But again, if they are in crisis, no, none of that stuff matters. Like you
Right.
put the brakes on everything, you deal with the crisis at hand. But again, a crisis should be very short term. But
Mm.
besides that, they still need to function.
So how do you know? Okay, I mean, obviously, crisis may be something extremely like it happened. There's a big emotional reaction. I get that.
Mm-hmm.
But like, obviously if a child is saying that they're suicidal or they're going to self-harm or right, obviously that can be a big concern. How
Of
do you
course.
know the difference?
I mean, I don't mess around when it comes to somebody saying they're suicidal. If you're suicidal, you need to be safe. So that means like you need to be taking your child to a hospital for an evaluation.
Mhm.
If your child is saying that they are going to harm themselves, that is like everything stops. It is like a 911. Like that is an emergency.
Mhm. Right. So how do you make children understand that that's not something to play with? Because I know somebody that's what their parent did. Took them to the hospital and then when they got there it was, "Oh, I'm okay.
Mm.
I'm okay. No,
Yeah.
I don't I'm okay."
I mean, I hope that they're in therapy then to learn better coping skills and just to say that I want to kill myself.
Right. See,
Like that can't be a coping skill.
see, parenting is hard.
Parenting is hard. It is very, very hard. And nobody has it all together and nobody, is doing it perfectly. And
Mm.
we're all just trying our best.
So, okay. So let's give some healthy boundaries, or some healthy boundaries that need to be in place, because clearly we can go from one extreme to the next. Those things are pretty obvious.
Right.
But in terms of, give us some more of the healthy ones, the day-to-day that should be in place to prevent us from getting, from
Yeah.
one extreme to the next.
Yeah. So boundaries, you're really looking on a day-to-day basis. Like, you can't completely cater to your children. Like, that's just not realistic. So the boundaries are, what can they do for themselves? Make them do it themselves. And if they don't do it, let them kind of suffer the consequences. I always love the example of like laundry. Your kids could do laundry from a very, very, very young age. It is not challenging.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes planning. It takes, time management skills. It takes like, oh, I have a soccer outfit that's dirty and I need it for next Tuesday. Like they need to figure that out. And the best thing about it is if they don't do their own laundry, the only person who suffers is them. Then they just wear dirty laundry,
Mm-hmm.
but for parents not to like swoop in and save them and be like, oh, you forgot to do your laundry. Let me do it for you. No, like let them deal with it. Um, your children need to communicate with you. So they can't just like come home one day and be like, oh, I need like 10 art supplies by tomorrow. Like, no, buddy. Like back up. My time matters too.
Right.
We have boundaries here. You need to prep me for that. You need to tell me, in a timely manner. And it's about just being a member of the family. You have to function with the entire family.
This stuff sounds hard.
Yeah. It's exhausting.
Yeah. Look, I think you guys can count me out of this whole parenting thing, but I admire those that do. Count me out. So with social media, right? This is a big thing. What are some healthy ways to parent around social media, right? Because then there's the comparison theory, and
Oh yeah.
right, I've seen parents take their kids' phones away because they just sit and scroll all day and compare themselves, and now they're sad and they're depressed and they feel bad about themselves. So, but you also don't want to kind of isolate your child so that they don't fit in socially.
Right.
So, what are some healthy ways to parent around social media?
So one is to have a conversation about social media and to really continue to drive home the point that what you're seeing on social media is somebody's most perfectly filtered moment, and it's not real. That is not their life. And because I have kids in my office all the time telling me how everybody else is so much happier than them. And I'm like, well, how do you know that? And they're like, well, just look on their social media page. And I say to them the same thing. Well, what would I say if I looked at your social media page? And they're like, I guess I look happy. Right. Because you're putting up a front too.
That's a good one.
Yeah. So to continually remind everybody that like, it's not real. Listen, the longer you can wait to give your kids social media, the better.
Okay.
But there definitely, unfortunately, does come a time when they're like the only one who doesn't have it. And it's a problem.
Right.
But to try to be one of the last ones instead of one of the first ones. And to put rules around it, especially when they're younger. There should be a screen time. They should not be on it for, 6 hours a day. But again, as they get older, you have to drop more and more those restrictions.
Right.
One of my favorite rules is that electronics do not belong in the bedroom.
That's a good one.
So right there, that's going to cut down on their time.
So then do they just stay in the living room longer so that they can have their
but at least you're seeing what's happening. And they're just not in their own world, like in their bedroom.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
No electronics. And that goes for computers too?
Yeah. Yeah. But I also tell parents that they should probably, walk the walk on that one, and that you also should not have your stuff in your bedroom. Like we prioritize sleep. Sleep is really, really important. It's completely overlooked how important it actually is for mental health.
Okay.
But you should not have your electronic devices in your room overnight, because you should just be sleeping.
And I've tried to implement that rule for myself multiple times. I don't always succeed, but I have tried in terms of my laptop. I've never tried with my phone, but maybe I need to go back to that.
Or at least put it on do not disturb.
Yeah.
Like, there's just no reason to have notifications coming in at night. There's no reason to be able to, like, not be able to sleep and go, grab your phone and scrolling through it, and all that blue light is now messing up your entire sleep rhythm. Like, sleep is really, really, really important. And also, that's another thing. When you get really frustrated, tired kids, like, you need to think, like, are they sleeping enough?
Or are they up scrolling?
Yep. Because a lot of them are up scrolling.
Okay, so social media is a big thing. What about like relationships? What are kind of some help? Because we know, right, it's inevitable. It's going to happen. We are not made to be alone. So
Right.
especially starting around high school, maybe even a little earlier. I'm not sure nowadays.
Much younger, yeah.
Right. This is really a thing. So how do we navigate that, or how should parents navigate, right, relationships, like romantic relationships with their children?
Right. Again, a lot of it is they're going to look for what they know. So it comes down to the parents doing so much work. When you have healthy relationships in the home, that's what your child is exposed to. That's what they know. Whether it's a healthy relationship between you and your partner or a healthy relationship between you and your child, that's what they're looking for. So, when they have relationships, though, that, are unhealthy attachments, like a parent calling them every 5 minutes, where are you? Where are you? Why aren't you texting me yet? And then when a significant other's doing that, they're like, oh, this is normal.
Right.
No, it's not normal.
Right.
So I always say to model it. And listen, your kids may date somebody that you don't really approve of. And if
What do you do then?
What?
What do you do if you don't approve?
Well, I think it depends on the reason. If you just don't really like them that much, like, you can't really do much, If there's like a safety issue, that's a whole nother story, obviously. But you're not going to love all of their friends. You're not going to love everybody they date. And sometimes the more you fight it, the more they go for it. And sometimes they really just need to learn their own ways. And it's hard. It's hard as a parent to watch your child go through that. It's hard as a parent to watch your child go through a toxic friendship and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they're still friends with them.
Right.
But sometimes, like, they're on their own journey.
So do you intervene at all? Like, hey, I don't think that is love, or hey,
Yeah,
that's not a good
I think
friend.
that you point it out and you have these conversations about, like, hey, I noticed, like, this happens in your relationship. And, when somebody has a really secure relationship, that normally doesn't happen. Again, it's like these conversations.
But if that mom, you just don't know.
Yeah, sometimes that happens too.
You don't get it.
Right. And sometimes that's true. Sometimes the parents see it differently than what it really is.
This is hard.
It's hard. Yeah. But if you continue to just try to have, constant talks, constant connection, and that's when I talk to parents all the time, like, how much quality time are you spending with your kids? Parents, put down your phone, like, spend the quality time with your kids. When they're home after school one day, be like, let's go for a walk. Help me make dinner. Let's sit down for dinner. Like, those are the moments that you need.
And quality time, meaning times where you can actually sit and talk to each other. Not necessarily sit, but even if you're doing something, so that you had the opportunity to talk to them.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's the more, quality time you can get in, the better. That's what builds a relationship. Like, when you have your own partner, like, you need quality time.
Right. Right. But then of course, when kids get to a certain age, they don't want to be bothered. They don't want to be around their parents. So
Yeah.
how do we still have that quality time if they don't want to be bothered?
Yeah, that's when it's like, okay, come with me and let's go food shopping. Let's run an errand together. Like, you just keep on asking. You keep on asking. You might get told no like 20 times, but one time you're going to be told yes. Kids do want to connect with you. They just don't want to be judged.
Want to connect. They just
They
don't
do.
want to be
They do want to
judged.
connect.
You think so?
Yeah, they definitely do. They just don't want to be judged for everything they say. And unfortunately, parents are sometimes judgy just because we're concerned. And we want them to learn from our mistakes, but so often they need to learn on their own.
And so it's more about, once they get to a certain age, more about being like a sounding board
Yeah.
than being judgmental.
Yeah.
Okay. So with all of this going on, at what point should a parent consider getting a therapist for their child?
Whenever you see your child struggling, I would say go right ahead. Everything in high school is so stressful. There's so much anxiety. There's so much happening. And
Mhm.
in school, they don't learn coping skills, you know? So that's what a therapist is able to provide, coping skills. And really, we all need coping skills. We all need ways to deal with our emotion. So I think it's always a good idea and always a good gift to get your child a therapist for even just a short term, just so they have a relationship with somebody, just so they can talk about some feelings and process some stuff, just so they can gain some coping skills.
So now what about parents that may be hesitant to get their child a therapist, right? Maybe they don't want the therapist to put things in the child's head, or right, they don't want them to brainwash the child. What would you say to that?
I would say that no good therapist should be doing that.
Okay.
So, to have a conversation with a therapist, make sure that it's a therapist you feel connected to, get referrals. Um,
Mhm.
Therapists are really there to kind of guide the child, help the process, give some very, good coping skills, not to brainwash or put things in children's heads. That is not what therapy is or should be, ever.
Okay. So in addition to helping them talk and process, what are, like, I guess maybe some specific things therapists can help children with?
I think a lot of it's identifying emotions, identifying, what to do when you start feeling these emotions, how to communicate better sometimes as well, especially with your parents.
Mhm.
So it's really, these skills for life that we all need, how to communicate, how to process emotions, how to handle emotions. Because emotions are a big thing.
Big thing.
They're a big
And you
thing.
wait till you if you gotta wait till you're an adult to learn how to deal with them, that's a whole nother thing.
We all know those adults out there who have never learned how to deal with their emotions.
Yes, yes, lots of them. We
Yeah.
know lots of them. Yeah,
So, give your child the gift early on how to handle emotions.
yeah, that'd be great. And what about, do you ever do, like, parent and child therapy, like,
Yes.
together?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what are some signs they may need parent-child therapy?
Whenever there's a breakdown in communication is normally, a big sign of we need to be able to get on the same page. And lots of times I'll ask both sides, like, what do you need from the other side?
Mhm,
What are you not getting that you need? And sometimes you know, it's easy then to come back onto the same page and say, oh, okay, like I get it.
mhm.
Because we all have our own style. We all have our own like attachment styles and how we show love. And sometimes it's different than how the other person shows love. Sometimes a parent they need hugs. They need hugs. They need physical,
Mhm.
and the kid's like, I don't need anything physical. I'm a talker. Like I just need to
Right.
talk a lot.
Uh-huh.
So it's
Right.
about understanding everybody and where they're coming from.
One thing that just popped into my mind, and we kind of talked on it about it earlier when we were talking about going back and apologizing to the
Mhm.
child and taking accountability. What happens when you have, let's say you have a teenager now, and maybe you weren't the best parent for the first however many years, right? And there is some unresolved trauma there. What do you recommend that both the child and the parent do from that, like that situation?
I think as a parent, it's completely okay to have those conversations and say, listen, when you were younger, I know that I did X, Y, and Z, and I can't go back and erase that.
Mhm.
But I know now that that shouldn't have happened. And I'm sorry.
Mhm.
And moving
Mhm.
forward, I'm going to try not to do X, Y, and Z. And that's something
Mhm.
I'm personally working on.
And do you find that children are usually receptive of that?
Yeah, because they get that we're all humans and we all mess up.
Mm,
We are not perfect people.
right. And now for any teens that may be listening, what if they have something that they want to bring to their parents' attention, but they are not sure that their parent may receive it well, or they don't know how to broach the topic with their parents? Like, what do you recommend for those children that feel like they need to talk to their parent?
Well, sometimes if it may be really challenging, again, that's when a therapist can help. So if you're seeing a
Okay.
therapist to say like, "Hey, this is what I want to talk about." Other times, I think that sometimes it's always good to like write it down and to say like, "You don't have to respond right away.
Okay.
Give yourself some time to think about this, but I wanted to let you know something I was thinking about."
Hmm.
Because sometimes as parents, we're just so quick to respond
Mm-hmm.
instead of saying, like, you know what? Let me think about that.
Right.
Let me get back to you.
So take time and process what the child is saying
Yeah.
without being offended.
Yeah. Yeah. Be, actually really happy that they want to talk to you about this, that they want to communicate with you about this. That means
Mm.
they want a relationship.
Mm. And so as a parent, how do you right that's not easy to hear that you messed up or you did
No.
something wrong or you did something that will drastically change your child maybe forever.
Hmm.
Like how as a parent, how do you be okay with that and accept that?
Yeah. It's, again, being okay with not being perfect and just knowing that you could only do better to be able to recognize and to change. And
Right.
listen, we try every day, and some days we do better than others.
Hmm.
And that is just life.
I love that. You gave us some really good things today. Let's talk about your book. What inspired you to write this book?
So, what inspired me was COVID.
Okay.
Because my phone would not stop ringing and I could not take on any more kids. And every other therapist that I knew was completely full. And these parents just wanted to help their kids. So I
Right.
said, I'm saying a lot of the same thing, like the same themes over and over in therapy. So I'm going to write down 10 foundations and parents can have that in their hand and start working through it. So my book is Mental Health Uncensored, 10 Foundations Every Parent Needs to Know. And it's broken into 5 physical and 5 mental health ways of helping your child. Because, like we talked about earlier, sleep is so crucial,
Right.
so crucial, but so are some other physical aspects as well. And I always talk about it like if you have a strong foundation, then your house could, weather any storm. But if you
Hmm.
have a weak foundation, any stressor that comes in, you're going to fall apart.
Right.
And then I wrote a workbook for teens based on these 10 principles as well. That way they could really take ownership and track it and implement it.
So they need to go by both. The
Yeah.
parents need to read the book and then the kids need to do the workbook.
Yes.
Where can they find them?
Amazon has both of the books.
Okay. So I'll make sure that I leave the links below so that you guys can go and get those books. That may also be maybe they aren't quite ready to go to therapy, but that could
Hmm.
also be maybe something more immediate that they can do maybe until they find the right therapist
Yes.
or they can get into whomever to see. I like that idea.
Absolutely.
So where can they find a therapist for their child? Because like I said, you are the first therapist I've ever met that actually works with teens.
Yeah.
So where like how do you find a therapist for your child?
I always say, like, ask around, ask your physician, ask your school, ask people in your community, ask your friends,
Mhm.
because chances are they will know. But when you're searching for a therapist, the relationship is the most important. They need to connect with your kids. If they are not
Mhm.
connecting with your kids, this will not work.
Okay. So is it really that the child is the one that needs to pick the therapist?
They need to feel comfortable with their therapist. They
Okay.
really do. You wouldn't want to talk to somebody you didn't like.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah.
Your kid doesn't either.
And so if they are thinking about it, what should they expect if they want to go and get their child therapy? Maybe the child asks to go
Yeah.
to talk to somebody. What should they expect in therapy, both the parent and the child?
That is really something to talk to the therapist about and say,
Okay.
how do you run your sessions? What does this look like? Because everybody is very different.
Hmm. Is the what if the child is afraid about the therapist going back and tell their parent everything? Is that a thing?
Yeah, that's a really big issue. So as a parent, you want to be able to let your child have some privacy with the therapist, and you should be able to
Mhm.
trust the therapist enough to know that if it's something, really dangerous, obviously they're going to tell you. But besides that, your
Mhm.
child really should have confidentiality with their therapist.
Wow. So this will be a safe space for
Hmm.
the child to talk about any and everything that they want to.
Absolutely.
I love that. I love that. How can people get in touch with you if they want to see if you are a good fit for their child?
Sure. They can go to my website, Keri Cooper Holistic Therapy. I'm also on Instagram at Keri Cooper Holistic Therapy.
Okay, perfect. So I will also make sure that those are in the link in the description below. So if you want to reach out to Keri, and if even if they're not in New Jersey, you may have some other recommendations for them.
Yes, and
Is
I'm
that
also
right?
licensed in a few other states as well.
Okay, perfect. So if you send me that information, I'll make sure I put all of that in the
Great.
description so people will know in advance. I'm going to have you give our Thriving Thursday tips. So every Thursday, I usually give a tip about how to thrive in your singleness. And I don't mean single in terms of relationship
Okay.
status. I mean single in terms of you being an individual person. Everything you have is everything that you need. So what would be your tip for our listeners, whether it's for the teen or for the parent, for them to thrive?
In order to thrive, you need
Mhm.
to sleep. And too many people are not sleeping, teens and adults. You need to sleep.
Is there
Prioritize it. Prioritize
mhm.
yourself, your own health. It impacts your physical health. It impacts your mental health. It is truly a foundation.
Is there a certain number that we should reach for every night?
Adults should be 7.
7 hours every night?
Yes.
Wow.
How many are you getting? You
Now I'm thinking, like, I might need to go to sleep right now. 7 hours?
Yes.
I don't know that I get 7 hours. I'm almost for certain that I don't.
You need to go through around 4 sleep cycles. 7 hours.
And what about teens?
Teens need a little bit more.
More?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Wow. You can always join the conversation live by joining the Perfect Partner Facebook community. If not, you guys enjoy the rest of your day. And Keri, thanks so much for joining
You're so
us.
welcome.